In 1986, the then US Attorney General had a commission on pornography, and in their final report they said very clearly child sex offenders are using computer networks to trade child sexual abuse material, to share information. This is nearly 40 years ago, and we've seen very little action from governments all over the world to regulate tech products that are almost always adopted by offenders for nefarious purposes right off the bat.
And in recent years, we've seen these technologies explode in their spread online. Parliament is hosting a roundtable of AI leaders, child safety leaders and others to discuss this issue. What are you hoping to see from that roundtable?
I'm really glad that we're having a roundtable and a gathering of like-minded child safety advocates. I think for all of us, the nature, the prevalence, some of the evolving concerns with these newly available, rapidly expanding technologies, we're familiar with the landscape. We're waiting on effective, urgent government action. Also, the elephant in the room is that we are operating and living within a completely different system that is some kind of techno-feudal global system where we have a few people who have a morbid concentration of wealth and therefore power and are using technology essentially to govern the world. Yeah. And it's a rigged game.
One of the things you and others have advocated for is criminalising some of the AI tools, often custom-made AI tools designed to produce child sexual abuse material. There are movements in other countries. Given that there are people like Elon Musk who have openly defied Australia's attempts in the past to ensure safety on those platforms, how effective do you think something like legislation outlawing those apps can actually be?
I think that's a great place to start. We need to do something because where we're at now is a very unsafe and very fraught environment, specifically for children.
Yeah. And do you think the government is moving fast enough on some of this? There are recommendations that have been put to it already. We know that they call it a priority. Do you think the government has acted fast enough to actually regulate this space?
Well, the short answer would be no. I don't think that previous governments and unfortunately the current government have acted swiftly enough when it comes to child safety and in particular child safety online.
When it comes to the childcare space, what do you think the government needs to be considering a priority here, particularly when we consider some of the technologies that are used in that sector?
It's hard to know where to begin. To combat child exploitation, whether it is contact offending in person or online child exploitation, it requires a suite of solutions. One of the major knowledge gaps that I identified years ago at the beginning of my advocacy pathway was how offenders are able to groom not just their victims, whether it's an individual victim or multiple victims, but how they're able to groom an entire environment. Because often we'll hear about these cases in the media, obviously after the fact, and the questions are, how did this happen? How did this workplace or other context in which the offending happened, how did it actually happen where there were technically other people present? And there are ways to identify grooming behaviours, the behaviours that often precipitate the contact offending, as well as that happen throughout the offending process. And I think that there is huge potential to disrupt and, better yet, prevent child sexual abuse if we actually are able to arm communities, in particular children and people who work with children, with that knowledge of how to spot it before it even happens.